Welcome to Uncle's channel. Thanks for watching today, and let's continue our journey to finish every single Game Boy and Game Boy Color game. Today, focus on a game called Dragon's Lair for the Game Boy Color. Now, this game is different from last week's game, which was just simply Dragon's Lair: The Legend for the original Game Boy. That was very much of a platforming game that used the IP of Dragon's Lair, but was not a Dragon's Lair game. This game here is literally the original Dragon's Lair game ported over to Game Boy, and I have to say it is amazing what they can do with the animations here on the Game Boy Color. I had no idea they could actually recreate cutscenes or little animation scenes so well on the Game Boy Color that really just captures the original spirit of the Dragon's Lair game from the arcade. Now, obviously, as you're looking at it, it doesn't look as good as the arcade, but every single scene in the arcade is recreated for the Game Boy Color. All the action and the gameplay is the same for the Game Boy Color. Even some of the voice acting made its way over to the Game Boy Color, which is truly phenomenal in this particular case. And even though the graphics do look truly amazing, the gameplay of the game is basically quick time events, so you're just simply pressing a button to get your character to do a certain animation at a certain time, like reaction speed. But still, you have a really fun game that looks fantastic on the Game Boy Color, and we're going to dive into every bit of it here in this video. Now, this game did get moved up in the queue a good bit because Retro Ed UK requested my earlier video, so naturally moves up in the queue. If there's a game that you want to see me cover sooner or later, let me know the name of the game in the comments down below, and just like Dragon's Lair, I'll move it right on up. Now, I always like to start the videos up looking at the box art for the game first, and the box art here for Dragon's Lair is pretty much iconic Dragon Lair's artwork. It's the same cover that was used for the 3DO version as well as the Sega CD version of the game, and so it's not like particular for the Game Boy Color, but it summarizes the game perfectly. You have Dirk the hero, or the knight, right there in the center. You have some of the goons off to the left-hand side. You have the Lizard King, who's one of my favorite characters, off to the right. You have Singe the dragon in the upper left, and you even have Princess Daphne in her crystal ball behind the logo itself. And it also says Don Bluth Presents, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on who he is in this video, because I did in the last video quite a bit, but he's essentially the brain behind like Lamb Four Times, Secret of Nymph, Five Goes West, The American Tale, Titan AE, All Dogs Go to Heaven, and so many more fantastic animated videos from our childhood. He's the brain and the animator behind this as well, and it definitely shows as you're playing the actual game. Now, when you start the actual game up here, it doesn't give you like a background story or anything like that. It just sort of shows a cutscene of like all the characters in the game, like Dirk the Daring, you know, your knight that you're going to be playing as, Princess Daphne, who you're going to be rescuing, some of the main villains you're going to encounter, the Lizard King is in there, some of the other smaller goons and whatnot, but it doesn't even show like Singe the dragon, so like the main villain that's not shown, which I guess is like more of a main reveal like at the end of the game, but still, like, why introduce like some characters but not all of them? And also they could have done maybe more like a actual intro story to show like how Princess Daphne was stolen by Singe the dragon and you're trying to rescue her. I don't know, they could have done just a little bit more of the intro besides just sort of a cutscene of different characters. But regardless, you know, the rest of the game is pretty fantastic when it comes to animation, so I can't complain too much on here. Now, when you start the game, you can either do the main game or you can do a tutorial, and they are essentially the exact same thing, except in the tutorial, it's going to tell you when to press the button for the quick action command. So if you're just trying to like learn the game a little bit, or like try to really get down pat exactly what all the rooms are, because this is at the core basics of the game, a game of memorization. If you know the rooms you're going into, you know which buttons to press, you know when to press them, you're going to defeat the game pretty quickly. So the tutorial here is actually a huge benefit as far as like just simply learning all the rooms that you're going to encounter and how to defeat them and how to move on to another room. And so I think the game itself, I think I read online, it's like 40 different little miniature stages you're going to go through before we get to the final boss, which is Singe the dragon. And so going through the tutorial will really give you an idea of what all the stages can be and exactly how to defeat them. But if you just do the tutorial, you're never going to get to the final boss in the game, so you can't say you actually beat the game by going through the tutorial. So we're going to go into the main game here, and the main game is always going to start out the exact same way. A little animation scene, or our first quick action scene of Dirk. He's walking across the bridge here. He falls through the bridge, and these little snakes or vines come out to try to grab him, and he has to do a quick little slice action, and then he rushes off on into the castle here. And the second scene is always going to be exactly the same as well. Basically the intro hallway here, the top is going to crumble down around him. You're going to see the right door open up. You have to press the right button in order to run through the right door. And so you're sort of getting the hang of the game a little bit here. It basically shows you an action scene and gives you an escape route, and you have to notice that and press the button at the right time in order to go in that particular direction. I'm pretty sure most of the viewers who are watching my video have a general idea how to play Dragon's Lair, but if you don't, it's a really simple, just press the button at the right time and you'll do that particular action, and you'll advance throughout the stages. Now, I'm not going to go through every single action stage you go through, but I am going to sort of do the highlight of my favorite ones I encounter here, because there's a heck of a lot of them. You know, there's some where you're just simply going down like a little elevator, some like you're just sort of going down a little river system here. Some where you're just simply walking through like a staircase. Some easy enemy ones like they're coming out like little sarcophaguses or coffins here. And so I'm not going to go through like every single one of them, but there are some that I like truly do love and adore in this game. And so I'm going to go through the ones that I enjoyed the most. Now the first one here is not going to be like the most memorable one in the game, but I just some reason enjoy the wackiness of it. And there's basically like a little horse you hop on, activate, or get the little electricity to activate it, and then you rush it down through this corridor here, and explosions happen to your left, they happen to your right. You just simply press left or right to avoid the explosions and sort of move your way around the pillars here till you get to the end. It's not like overly complicated, but there's just something about the little horse animations I enjoy quite a bit. And even like if you died, you like ram the horse into a wall. That's also entertaining. And I don't know, I do enjoy this one. I also like the one where you're going down a hallway here, and basically you have to rush down a little bit, and then these giant skeleton hands are going to come out and try to grab you. You have to press the action button to slice the hand back, jump further down the hallway, another giant skeleton hand tries to come out, grab you, have to slice that, continue on jumping down the hallway, and then hop off to the left at the close of the hallway. All these stages are very short, very simple, but you, like I said earlier, you have to sort of watch out what's happening and know when to press the buttons at the right time. And when you do it at the right time, the animation is very smooth. Now the next highlight for me is actually one that reminds me of a game I played as a kid called Marble Madness. Because in that game you had all these you had your main marble, you're trying to guide through a maze, you race against someone else in their marble. And I absolutely adored that game. And when I came across this particular stage in Dragon's Lair, where basically a giant boulder is chasing you down a corridor here, and there's all these little marbles or these giant balls coming down trying to hit you, it reminded me so much of Marble Madness that I couldn't help but enjoy it and want to mention it in the video. There's just a lot of charming stages. Now the next one I'm going to mention is probably like the most iconic one for the game, but I just can't help but love it. It's the one featuring the Lizard King, because the Lizard King is a cool looking character in himself, but he reminds me so much of King John from the Robin Hood, the Disney movie. And I don't know, like I really do enjoy the animation behind him, but you essentially start out here, you're trying to dodge away from the Lizard King, and then he's chasing you down a corridor here, and you have to sort of dodge off into the right door that opens up at the right time. Sort of follow the little green creature in front of you, and you dodge off in the right direction. And you have to do like 4 or 5 different dodges, and when you get to the final room here, you do a final encounter with the Lizard King, and it's a great little dodge back and forth, and then a final slice to take him out. And it's just a really enjoyable, really smooth animation in a fight scene inside of not just a Game Boy game, but just simply a game in general. And I can't help but love the Lizard King. Also, if he captures you and the scene of him like dragging you down the hallway, also pretty iconic. And trust me, I got to see that scene a lot in the game while trying to figure out exactly the moves I needed to do. Now the next one here reminds me of like an 80s retro wave chessboard with a giant electric figure in the background. There's just so much I enjoy about this as far as like 80s aesthetic, and they really just captured it absolutely perfectly here. But also the gameplay for this particular one is probably my favorite gameplay in the entire game, because he basically sends little electric waves down the chessboard, and it shows you like a little exit pattern on every single one of the waves that are coming down. And you simply have to jump off in the correct exit pattern, whether it's left, right, up, or left and right. There's a certain pattern to it. I had it memorized as I was going through the game here. But eventually you get to the front, and you can take your final slice at the little demon figure, a little electric demon. And this one here, I just love the overall aesthetic to it. I love the colors to it. And I love the gameplay element. This is actually, I take it back, the Lizard one, most iconic. This is my favorite one in the entire game. And I looked forward to it every time it appeared in the cycle that I was going through. And some of these mini games or little mini stages appear multiple times as you're trying to work your way to the final dragon stage. Now another one that is very similar to the last one, or at least aesthetic wise anyway, is there's a giant shadow and knight coming down the hallway here, and essentially you have to dodge left or right to avoid the horse and the knight that are coming at you. And you always know when to dodge, because like a little pair of spikes are going to pop up to your left or to your right, and you dodge in the opposite direction to get away from the horseman. And I know he's not a headless horseman, but he reminds me so much of like Ichabod Crane and the Legend of Sleepy Hollow from a kid. And so I also enjoyed the aesthetics of this one, and the gameplay is also pretty smooth. Not as fun as the last one I mentioned, but still pretty smooth in its own right. But if you want to talk about like some of the best animation that's going to display here, I think one of the best scenes is you go into a room here, and there's like a bubbling cauldron, and it bubbles over with like a green, I don't know what you want to call it, green goo or green stew and whatnot. And then you go over to a little potion shelf, you pick up a potion. Like, look at the animation here. You pick up the potion, you're like, what does this potion say? And then the bubbling stew that's bubbled over comes up, turns into a giant monster, and its tongue tries to come out and grab you. You have to take the attack button, slice the tongue, and then hop away and escape from the room. This is a really great animation scene, and it's just classic looking animation. Everything about this is like the animation styles I like. And there's so many cool creatures and so many cool action parts that if you enjoy 80s animation, you can't help but enjoy this game. And I feel like the Game Boy captured it pretty well. And then after you've gone through, like I said, I think about 40 stages here, you finally come across the final one, which is going to be against Singe the Dragon. And you're basically fighting in his giant coin lair. It reminds me of the end of Aladdin, the very first Aladdin Disney movie, when your Jafar has already become like sorceress Jafar, and he's captured, Princess Jasmine, and Aladdin goes up there to try to break Jasmine free and take out Jafar. The ending of the movie. But the lair there reminds me a great deal of this, and I don't know if Aladdin borrowed from that, but at least to me, it reminds me a great deal of it. But anyway, you're going up against Singe the Dragon here, and Princess Daphne is trapped in her little crystal ball. She actually has some voice lines in the game. She says at one point, "Save me." And another point, she says, "Slay the dragon, use the magic sword." And voice acting for the Game Boy Color, there's very little voice acting in most games, or if any voice acting, and this one's actually a pretty decent quality for the Game Boy Color. So that's impressive, but not as impressive as just like the overall fight scene here. Just simply watching the dragon breathe up and down at one point, chase after you, breathing fire at you, using its claws to grip around like a little, I don't know, pedestal or rock that you're behind at one point, and then like the sword fight itself, as you pick up the magic sword, and you charge up with his fire there, and you take the final blow at him. Man, this is like a really great action scene on the Game Boy Color, and it's amazing like this is even capable on a 8-bit handheld device from basically 1997 or 98 was when it came out. Whichever year it came out, late 90s. It's amazing that this is on this particular system. After you defeat the dragon, you rip the key off of his little necklace here, and you take it over and you free Princess Daphne, and that is the end of the game. But let's talk about the game as an overall. Now, the game as an overall is very short. You can finish the game if you know like all the gameplay mechanics, probably I'd say maybe like 15-minute gameplay loop, but you're not going to finish it in 15 minutes. You're going to have to go through the tutorial multiple times to learn like all the different mechanics, all the different movesets, memorize all the movesets, memorize all the levels, and once you have it all memorized, you have it down pat pretty darn well, then you can go through the main game and work through it. So I'd say dedicate maybe 2 hours-ish to learn the game and sort of, work your way through it. I think that's a fair amount of time to get through the game, but don't expect to just simply sit down and blast through it first try, because you're going to have to learn the mechanics as you go. Now, as far as like the gameplay mechanics work, they're pretty top tier to me. Like, you know exactly when to press the buttons, especially if you use the tutorial here. And there's also like little sound effects sometimes that go along with the buttons to help you know exactly when to press them. So like the responsiveness of the controls, I think are pretty darn good. The graphics in the game, I've already mentioned, I think are top tier. Yes, they're not as good as the arcade, like I said, but for the Game Boy Color, this is pretty top tier animation. There's no background music, but I don't believe there's any background music in the arcade either. Some background music might have been nice as you're going through it, like some atmosphere music, but at the same time, they probably didn't have a lot of memory left on the cartridge to add background music. But I would have probably, I would have rather them take out Daphne's voice or a few lines at the end and just add in a very basic atmospheric soundtrack in the background, even if it's minimalistic, just sort of to keep the, I don't know, the mood going as you're working through all these different stages. And there's also the idea that the game itself is just simply not very complex, and I know like some players are going to be turned off by that, but at the same time, like it's not complex on like what you have to do, but in order to get good at it, it is sort of complex to have to go through that tutorial and memorize everything. And then I know the detractors will say, well, it's just a memorization game of like when to press a button. And yes, I can acknowledge that, but at the same time, like there's something charming about it. There's something fun about it. So even though it is like very simplistic, I think most players are going to have a fun time journeying through this just simply because the animations are so good. You're going to be amazed about it. But also like your main protagonist, Dirk, gets out of all these situations or kills the creatures. Like even though it's a button that you press, like it's entertaining to see those particular actions. And also there's going to be the people out there who just simply say, hey, it's not the same as the original Dragon's Lair. If I'm going to play it, I'm going to play it on the 3DO, or I'm going to play it on the arcade, or I'm going to play it on probably this point the Switch or the PlayStation 5 or something like that. So why am I going to play it on the Game Boy Color? And to that's probably a fair argument. There are better ways to play this game. But if you're looking for a graphical legend or a graphical pioneer for the Game Boy Color and just sort of have a little bit of a gaming history for you, this is the way to go, at least for that. So I'm going to give the game a 7 out of 10. I think it's a fun game. I think it's worth your time to go through, but I can understand that there are better versions to play out there. But if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out my other videos listed up above, and go out there, find a great game to play. Simply have a great rest of the day.